do you think Venom Snake is kind of on the same path as Raiden in terms of appreciation among the fans? Like, 'cause I feel like when Raiden first was revealed, there was a lot of backlash to that, right? Everyone was like, "What? I'm not playing a Snake. This is ridiculous." But I feel like people have warmed up to that idea over time, and like the idea that you're seeing Solid Snake from someone else's perspective. Do you think a similar thing is happening with Venom Snake, where people will look back at that a bit more favorably?
I think it's exactly the same thing. I think everybody felt duped, and once they got over that, and they simply just took Venom for what he is, they had a bit more compassion for his character. To be honest, out of all of the characters in the entire franchise, maybe except for Solid, Venom is the one you probably should feel the most bad for.
Yeah.
Because he gets completely used.
Yeah,
and but even at the end where he's like, well, you know what? I kind of understand what's going on now.
Yeah.
And he still continues to do his role because he's that committed to the idea.
Yeah.
What Big Boss was trying to do.
Yeah.
And I find that kind of endearing for the character out of all of them. Like whatever happens later on between 5 and Metal Gear 1 that made Venom, whatever happens with that story, which we don't know anything.
No.
And I think that like, unless they show him just like completely going off the wall, like he's one of the better characters in the franchise.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, I do think it is quite interesting to well, I guess you kind of are putting his shoes in the game, but like the idea of like just one day finding out that your appearance has been changed, and without your consent, you've been turned into the Phantom of Big Boss. Like, the toll that would have on you mentally is immense. Like, I just couldn't imagine being put there. And I do think, like, you know, if we do get a game in between MGS 5 and Metal Gear 1, or if we do get a remake of Metal Gear 1, like, there's so much room there to explore Venom Snake's psyche and kind of where he is mentally, and create, like, a reason for why the real Big Boss sends in Snake to take him out, essentially.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that game needs to be made.
Yeah.
Like, out of any game that they could possibly do, if they were trying to go back and do something about the Cobra unit, that'd be cool. But we need to know, like, that there's a giant hole in the plot right there, which is what I thought Phantom Pain was supposed to be filling in.
Yeah.
And it didn't.
No.
It just kind of, like, alluded to something else being there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I do hope we get that remake, and I hope they really kind of take some risks with that, which quite nicely brings me on to my next question. So obviously we have MGS Delta coming out soon, the remake of MGS 3. Do you think that game should be an almost shot-for-shot remake? Or do you think that game should take some risks? And
you asked this question.
and have you played the Final Fantasy VII remake?
I have.
So
I played the original, and the original was very impactful for me when the first time I played it.
Yeah. So obviously, you're aware that in the remake they kind of take some interesting risks with the storyline. Right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we can talk about spoilers or not.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Yeah. But do you think, like, so going back to Delta, do you think it should take similar risks, or do you think it should be quite shot for shot?
I don't think it needs to be the exact same game, because we have that game.
Yeah.
What we need is a modern playing version of that game, and the storyline to be relatively the same. I would say at least 95% the same.
Yeah.
But I think that you guys kind of talked about it too with the
Skullface?
Yes, with Skullface, like the little joke about him popping up and then being like, "Hey, I'm picking up a bullet," and then
Yeah.
like trying to take off. That would be legitimately awesome.
Yeah.
I don't want to see him all the time.
No.
That would be. But at the same time, like, the idea of Skullface is absurd to me.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the whole concept is there's some guy coming around picking up after you, but you're the only guy who can go in there and get this job done. Kind of like means that this guy can do the job too if he really wanted to. So
Yeah.
it kind of detracts.
It does, yeah. It kind of takes away from Big Boss or Naked Snake at the time. He's like the guy they send in, and then it's like, well, you couldn't have just sent in Skullface.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird. Like that part of 5 doesn't sit well. But back to 3, the story I think is fine. Shot for shot, we saw what happened when they tried to not make it shot for shot with Twin Snakes, and we saw the backlash for it. If it's not shot for shot, it needs to be tastefully done.
Yeah,
and that's basically all I have to say when it comes to that. Like, I'm not opposed to them tweaking things here and there because there's some improvements that could be done to that game.
Yeah.
Story wise, line, they don't need to touch the story. The story, if they do, I think they would probably cause more harm than they would fix.
Yeah. No. What do you think about kind of continuing on that idea? So a lot of I made a video talking about ways I think you could like improve MGS3, and it was mostly talking about like gameplay ideas. But a lot of people in my comment section were talking about they wish, or they wouldn't mind seeing a bit more development between the boss and Naked Snake to kind of make that ending a bit more impactful. Because it's kind of a lot of their relationship is heavily, it's just like implied in the original. It's kind of like, they have a history together, and then you just kind of have to believe that, oh yeah, this is really hard for Naked Snake to do. Do you think there's any room for development there to kind of make the impact harder?
They could totally do that. I think they could probably incorporate that into Delta relatively easy in regards to, well, they're an optional section, kind of like where in the original Metal Gear you had the VR training. You could do an optional section similar to that where you're essentially just going through and learning different techniques and learning how to play the game, but there's story also within that. So that way when you jump into the game, you're not sitting there like bumbling around, like trying to get to the first half. Well, it's not a half, but like the first section of the game, because you really don't know all the parts in the game.
Yeah.
So they could really go into that, but also give you a reason to go into that with the development of the character, and then it plays really well into the storyline where you feel attached to him, or to her. That's
that. I've seen a few people kind of have a similar idea where like you could almost like, as like a tutorial to the game, you could almost flash back to when Naked Snake and the boss were developing CQC together. That could almost act like a tutorial, but also you could really flesh out their relationship a bit within that, which would be quite an interesting way, because obviously like tutorials are normally the most boring part of any game, aren't they? It's kind of like, oh, I've got to get through the tutorial. It'll be interesting to see a game really put weight into a tutorial mission, so to speak, and have it impacts the overall story, I think.